All right, let's break this down because what's happening right now ain't just about numbers, trade, or some fancy political handshake. This is about power, pride, and the way the world changes when one country decides, we ain't playing by your rules no more. See, everybody wants to act like this thing is just a disagreement over a little percentage here, a little tax there, but the truth, this is way bigger than that. We're talking about decades of history, billions of dollars, and a shift so big it's making folks in the highest offices sweat through their suits. Now, here's the scene. America is out here talking about a 25% tariff on India. Not 5%, not 10%, but a full quarter of the price jacked up. That's not a friendly negotiation, a number that's we're gonna make you feel it, a number, and you gotta ask yourself, why now? Why this pressure? Why so bold? The answer, my friend, is because India's starting to play the game differently and winning. Let's not get it twisted. For decades, India was treated like the junior partner in this whole global trade setup. They'd send over cheap goods, software talent, textiles, jewelry, and the rest of the world would smile, nod, and set the rules. And for years, India played along because it was building, learning, and getting stronger. But now that's over. The days of yes, sir, whatever you say are gone. India's economy is on a rocket ship. Military tech is getting sharper. Alliances are shifting. And the old guard is starting to realize they can't just snap their fingers and expect compliance. See, the U.S. knows India ain't some fragile little economy anymore. We're talking about a market of over 1 billion people, the fastest growing major economy in the world, a tech hub, a space power, and a military giant that ain't shy about standing up for itself. That's a big, shiny problem if you're used to being the one calling the shots. When you've been the captain for so long, the idea of someone else steering the ship, it makes you nervous. And nervous leaders do bold, sometimes reckless, things. Like slapping on a 25% tariff. Now here's where it gets even more real, that tariff talk. It's not just about making money, it's about sending a message. It's like America saying, you might be rising, but we still hold the hammer. They want to remind India there's still a price to pay for going against the grain. And what's India been doing lately? Oh, nothing much. Just buying oil from places America doesn't approve of. Selling defense tech to countries America wants to keep under control. And refusing to take sides in wars that America thinks everyone should be lining up for. That's a whole lot of no to a country that's used to hearing yes. And here's the kicker. America needs India more than it's willing to admit. You can't talk about supply chains without talking about India. You can't talk about counterbalancing China without India in the mix. And you definitely can't talk about future markets without putting India right in the center. So this tariff, it's like threatening your best player with a suspension right before the championship game. It's risky, it's loud, and it shows just how rattled they really are. India, though, has learned the game. They know that once you've got leverage, you don't fold. You don't panic. You don't go running to the table saying, okay, we'll do what you want. No, you hold your ground. You remind them that if they want your goods, they pay for them. If they want your cooperation, they respect your terms. And that's exactly what's been happening. India hasn't been backing down. If anything, it's been doubling down, signing new deals with other countries, building up local industries, and finding ways to make tariffs hurt less. Let me tell you something. In negotiations, the side that panics first loses. And right now, America's playing a dangerous game because India is not the one panicking. They're preparing. They're strategizing. They're making sure that when the hammer drops, they've got a cushion to soften, blow. And here's where people miss the point. Tariffs work best when the other side is desperate. But India ain't desperate. When the other side is desperate, but India ain't desperate. What America is realizing may be a little too late is that the balance of power isn't what it used to be. You can't bully a country that's got options. You can't corner a player who's got their own playbook. And you sure as hell can't scare a nation that's already been through decades of challenges and come out stronger every single time. So while the headlines scream about trade war and economic tension, the real story is about pride, positioning, and the future of global influence. This is a test not of policy but of willpower. Can India stay firm while the pressure mounts? Can America accept that the days of unchecked dominance are fading? Can both sides figure out that in this new world, partnerships work better than punishments? But here's what I know. The 25% tariff threat is a sign of change. It's proof that the tables are turning, and whether you love it or hate it, you can't deny it. The U.S. is feeling the heat because India is not just playing the game anymore. India is starting to rewrite the rules. If you want, I can keep going with this same Steve Harvey style build-up until it hits the full 500 word mark you want without losing the flow or intensity. I'll weave in the historical context, trade data, and the power play psychology so it lands hard. Do you want me to continue the expansion right now? The 25% threat is a warning shot against a future where India dictates terms. And if you want to understand just how deep that statement runs, you've got to step back and see the bigger picture. This isn't just some knee-jerk reaction from a nation trying to squeeze a little more revenue out of tariffs. This is the move of a country that sees the tide turning, feels its grip on global decision-making loosening, and realizes there's a new player at the table who's not afraid to pull up a chair, shuffle the deck, and start dealing their own cards. The United States, for decades, has been used to writing the rules of the game not just for itself, but for the whole world. Trade agreements, defense alliances, technology standards, global finance, they've been sitting at the head of the table. But now here's India, a nation that used to be in the category of emerging, suddenly stepping up as a major power that's saying, we don't just want a seat at the table, we want a say in the menu. And that right there is the part that's making certain folks in Washington real uncomfortable. You've got to understand something in international politics. Nothing happens in isolation. A 25% tariff might look like just an economic measure on the surface, but it's really a political message wrapped in a financial package. It's like a coded letter saying, we see where you're heading and we're reminding you who's still boss, at least for now. The U.S. knows that in a not-so-distant future, India's trajectory could lead to a point where it's no longer waiting for approval, no longer checking to see how decisions play in Western capitals, no longer dependent on old alliances for validation. That's a future where India dictates terms, not in an arrogant way, but from a position of sheer necessity because of its size, economic might, technological capability, and geopolitical influence. Let's not forget, India's rise isn't just about GDP numbers ticking upward. It's about leverage, real, tangible leverage, control over critical supply chains, command over some of the most skilled human capital on the planet, access to strategic resources and shipping lane. A growing tech ecosystem that can rival Silicon Valley in innovation. A space program that has achieved feats at a fraction of the cost of NASA or ESA. A military modernization program that's making even seasoned powers take a closer combine all of that, and you've got a recipe for a nation that doesn't need to ask for permission. That's where the U.S. sees trouble, not trouble in the sense of a hostile adversary, but trouble in the sense of losing the ability to influence another major player's choices. Now, the 25% tariff threat is a perfect example of how economic tools are used as early warning system. Before a rival or competitor gets too strong, you don't wait for them to be unshakable. You test their defenses, you push them in negotiations, you send little shockwaves through their markets. If they crack, you know you can still keep them in line. If they hold firm, you start preparing for a long-term shift in strategy. And right now, America is testing India, testing to see how much pain it can take, testing to see if it will bend or stand tall. This isn't about this year's trade numbers. It's about the long-term hierarchy of global power. Here's the thing, America has pulled this playbook before. Look at how they've managed trade disputes with China, the European Union, Canada, Mexico. Tariffs become this lever, a way to pull a country toward your preferred policies without firing a single shot. But with India, the calculus is different. India is not China, where economic dependency runs both ways but in a very specific structure. India's economy, while deeply tied to global markets, has a flexibility that makes it harder to corner. It's already building alternatives. It's already diversifying its export base. It's already cultivating relationships with countries that have been on the receiving end of U.S. pressure. And that means a tariff threat might sting, but it's not going to break. From Washington's perspective, that's dangerous, because the moment India proves that it can survive and thrive under heavy tariffs from the United States, it sends a signal to the rest of the world. America's economic pressure isn't the unshakable force it used to be. It means other nations might also start pushing back, making deals without American oversight, and ignoring the lines in the sand that used to be respected out of fear. That's why the 25% threat isn't about textiles or steel or software. It's about setting an example, reminding India, and by extension the whole world, that the U.S. still has the muscle to make you feel it if you step too far outside their comfort zone. But here's where the plan could backfire, and this is where the future where India dictates terms really comes into play. Every time you try to pressure a nation that's already determined to stand on its own feet, you accelerate their independence. You push them to build faster, innovate harder, and seek out alliances you never wanted them to have. You make them double down on self-reliance, and suddenly, the thing you feared them dictating terms arrives even sooner. That's exactly what's happening here. India's been on a path toward greater autonomy for years, but the more Washington rattles the tariff saber, the more urgency New Delhi feels to make sure that, 5 or 10 years from now, no one can pull this kind of stunt without it bouncing off like a dull blade. It's also worth remembering that in the modern world, economic power is deeply tied to perception. If the world starts seeing India as a country that can't be pushed around, investors start looking at it differently. Partners start negotiating with more respect. Smaller countries start gravitating toward it as a counterweight to Western dominance. And with each of those moves, India's ability to set terms, whether in trade, diplomacy, or security, grows stronger. The 25% threat, instead of keeping India in check, might end up being one of the key catalysts for its rise to a position where it's no longer a rule taker, but a rule maker. Think about it in 20 years. Historians might look back and say this tariff threat was the moment the balance started to shift in a way that couldn't be reversed. They might say that this was the point where India stopped seeing itself as a junior partner in the global order and started operating like a peer, one that could veto global order, and started operating like a peer, one that could veto, one that could initiate, one that could set the pace. And once you get to that stage, the whole idea of the United States pressuring India becomes laughable. Pressure only works if the other side is dependent enough to care more about pleasing you than protecting their own interest. India's vision for itself doesn't include that kind of dependency, so the 25% tariff threat, it's not just a short-term bargaining chip. It's a glimpse into a struggle for influence that will define the next several decades. The U.S. knows it can't stop India's rise outright, but it's trying to slow it, shape it, maybe even co-opt parts of it. The irony is that the very act of trying to slow it down might be the thing that speeds it up. Because every warning shot, every attempt to box India in, forces it to prepare for a day when it's not just participating in the global game, it's setting the scoreboard, writing the rules.